Good evening, everyone. My name is Rowan Conway. I'm the RSA's Director of Innovation and Development, and it's my great pleasure to welcome you all here this evening. Before we begin, can I ask you to put your mobile phones to silent? We are filming tonight and live streaming over the web, so welcome to those of you who are joining us and watching online. A reminder that the hashtag tonight is RSA Design, if you'd like to get involved in the discussion on Twitter. Now that the housekeeping notices are over, I'm delighted to introduce this evening's special event. Tonight's event is part of RSA activity exploring design-led innovation in industry, and we're delighted to be working in partnership with Innovate UK to deliver this work. Through a programme of research and public events, we're investigating how design for industry can contribute to a more productive society and economy. It really is my great pleasure to introduce this evening's keynote speaker, award-winning innovator and entrepreneur Laurence Kemball-Cook. Laurence is the founder and CEO of Pavegen, a clean technology company which manufactures a flooring system that converts kinetic energy from footfall to off-grid electricity and data. Laurence founded Pavegen in 2009 with a little bit of help from RSA funding from RSA Student Design Award, which he won. And since then, the business has scaled across the world and forged collaborations with companies such as Adidas, Google, and Heathrow Airport. And he was telling me earlier that Steve Jobs' number 2 is now on your board. Is that correct? So he's blitz-scaled, I think is what you'd call that in modern-day speak. In his talk this evening, Laurence will share his thinking on design-led business growth and how design as a core principle of business is important to growing ideas into enterprises. I'll be joining Laurence later on stage for a discussion, and we're looking forward to hearing your questions, so keep thinking while he's talking. But without further ado, please join me in welcoming Laurence Kemball-Cook.
Well, thank you so much to Rowan for the kind introduction. I'm delighted to be here at the RSA and in the great room. It's a place that has seen some of the most exciting debates, I think, that have led to fundamental shifts in society as we know it. This is a community that's really close to my heart, and this is also the building that I had all my first meetings with investors, and we closed our first contracts. So we also won the award from the RSA, but I was also kicked out of the coffee shop in this building for slightly overstaying my welcome a few times. But I'm looking forward to talking about how designers imagine the future, and my experiences that have helped me take an idea to become a global technology. The future is being designed today. Designers literally have the future in their hands. From the food systems to the transport and the mobile computers that we carry in our pockets, we are affected by good and bad design hundreds of thousands of times a day. Just think about all the design that took place to get you out of bed in the morning, to make you your coffee, and to take you to the office. So the design of a coffee machine, for example, is not just about a package that can make hot water and pour that water over coffee granules. No, not at all. So what I believe is that actually designing a coffee machine is about the emotional connectivity to the product. It's the experience, the smell, the feeling as the user takes part in that product. So design is really an act of communication, which means having a deep understanding of the person with whom the designer is communicating with. So we're looking at a huge change happening in the UK ahead of us. So with new technologies like artificial intelligence and automation happening, they are very clever, but they can be very frightening. So, for example, I believe with the rise of autonomous vehicles, the challenge of a car, which is a great thing fundamentally, but the decision whether a car runs me over, and as it's been controlled by a robotic algorithm, that algorithm decides whether I die or whether I live. And actually, is it a good idea to allow an algorithm to value life? And who says if I'm more valuable than 5 cows on the other side of the road? So I think the decision needs to be taken really carefully, and it's an ethical decision by government and private companies to really decide the fundamental rules at which we do this. But artificial intelligence is rising at a really fast rate. So with vehicles alone, the transportation sector, over the next 15 years, will see nearly 1 million people potentially without jobs. In administration and office work, another 1 million will be lost. Manufacturing, over 1 million roles, and retail, importantly. Look at the checkouts within a supermarket, a retail environment. That is really dangerous in that there may not be any people in that exchange as you go to buy your groceries at the end of the day. So today, even without AI and these technologies, cities are already scary and not really designed for humans. So we are not there yet, but we are in need to find a way to make cities smart and to be a better place to live in. So what I'm talking about is a better future where design and technology place humans at the center. So as opposed to all these machines and a city, I believe that smart cities was defined as a place where there's seamless communications, easy transportation across a city, whole networks of wireless sensors that can communicate in real time what people are doing, how much energy is being used. And then also a way that can actually have decentralized power, generated where and when it's needed. So I think there's a really interesting theme with smart cities. Aside from all these sensors and autonomous vehicles and the city effectively being managed by an algorithm, that actually we need to forget about this Internet of Things driven smart city. But actually, I really believe it's about the Internet of Beings. The Internet of Beings is a philosophy that has allowed us to take our idea forward and to really make humans at a core. And the reason it's really important is that people have got to live in these cities, and cities are becoming an increasingly unhappy place to live. But as soon as you make people part of that solution, it really changes the way people behave in those cities. So at Pavegen, we believe in the human, the physical, and the digital as part of people interacting in urban environments. I'm going to touch a bit more on the Internet of Beings later on, but I wanted to, before I go into it, is talk a bit about my journey through design, and I guess how it led me to where Pavegen is today. So stepping back, it all started for me at Simon Langton Grammar School for Boys. So I was always interested in how things worked, and I was not very academic. I may have been thrown out of a school or two in my journey, but I was always really practical and curious about the world. Discovering design made me realize that I could apply that. I went to Simon Langton Grammar School, and I found myself taking school design projects really seriously. I'd work through the night. My mum would come down at 7 in the morning, and I'd still be working on this project. I'd be working 24/7. And I guess for me, it was because I had, an inspirational teacher who helped me understand the significance of design in the world we live in. So it wasn't about building a bird box or a chair that previous syllabus had led me to do, but it was about really solving real-world problems with cutting-edge technologies at the time. So we even had a lab where in 2004 we were using some of the most cutting-edge CAD/CAM softwares and rapid prototyping machines that were unheard of. So I think we actually managed to drag down Brian Hurlow, who's my teacher. He retired a few years ago, but I think Brian Hurlow may have come down. Brian, are we here? Can we see a hand? Round of applause to Brian for So I guess Brian is one of those pioneers that really instilled this kind of legend of design and technologies in schools, and he's furthered it since he's left with Dan Pledger, who's taken that real core belief to schools. And I think that it's a real big challenge because there's a lot of schools and loads of bright kids that could really benefit from this, and we need to really spread that learning of design and technology to engage every student and make it fun. And I was one of the lucky ones that was able to be excited at a young age. So after I left Simon Langton, I went to study industrial design and technology at Loughborough University. And when I was there, we were working on a live project with E.ON. And so as part of the university works, we were collaborating with E.ON. And E.ON said, Laurence, we've worked with you for 6 months. We like what you're doing. Do you want to come work for us? So there's me, 20, 21-year-olds, thinking, great, let's go do this. So I went off with E.ON to develop the future of street lighting in cities. And we were basically a ninja group within E.ON who were in charge of developing new lighting technologies that could be powered by renewables. So we found an LED company. E.ON invested £500,000 in them. We wanted to do some solar research. E.ON invested in the Solar Research Institute that we were working with. And we had a huge amount of funding, and it was a really incredible experience. And the aim was that as a truck drove past a street light, the wind turbine on board would generate energy. And when the sun was shining, you generate power. But at the end of the year, we failed. it wasn't possible to make a streetlight powered by solar energy. There's lots of shading in urban environments. It doesn't make it viable. And you can't get good wind unless you're out in the sea. You don't get good wind in urban areas. So hanging my head in shame, I left E.ON. It was a very expensive time for them to be part of the organisation, but left E.ON having failed to deliver a solution for urban power. So I returned to Loughborough, and in returning, we were doing the Royal Society of Arts Design Directions competition. So I came up with a solution that was about redesigning rural postal services. But anyway, I went in with this design, and I showed the team of judges. I don't think I've ever been so scared in my life, and presented this new design for making rural postal services work much more efficiently. And luckily, I won the top award, won £5,000. And that £5,000 at that time is equivalent of what we can do today for about £500,000. And so I may have spent a small amount of that money researching in the Students' Union, but I wouldn't possibly comment on what exactly happened. But the rest of the money I spent really thinking about this problem of energy in cities. So I sat in my bedroom. I was there for, I think, 3.5 years. I happened to have a camera crew there as I was in there, funnily enough. Really looking at how can we make an energy play in cities that works. And I kept thinking, I thought, hold on, what if you can use the energy of people to power part of the city itself? So I came up with this idea. I went off, and I guess I hacked a prototype together in 14 hours. You can see on the left my first prototype. Did some testing, and then released it as my degree show project. The really interesting thing about the degree show is there's 100 students, and suddenly I made front page for about 5 to 10 major publications. There was a tweet every 24 seconds for about 4 days, and we had thousands of people around the world phoning up trying to buy this product that didn't exist. So we had to really go and understand how it worked. Now, I believe you've got to test products with humans, because the best engineering team in the world don't really understand necessarily how humans interact with it. So you've got to lead with human-centered design. So the first thing I did is I went back to my old school. I think we arrived unannounced, and we almost illegally installed the product on the floor. There was no British standards, no insurance at that point, but we really wanted to test it. And the results were really interesting. So this is the floor we laid down. It lit up when you stood on it, and this is what happened. So what we realized is that we'd actually created the gamification of energy. So it was a way that people could really engage in the energy generation process, and we thought that was really important. The next thing is engineering anything for a city requires a huge technical challenge. So you've got to work underwater, there's incredible fatigue resistance, the environmental conditions mean it's almost like an oven on one day, and then in another day it's -30, colder than any freezer. So I had to make it work. So we had to test this product and evolve it so that it would work underwater. And that was a real struggle, and we had to prove to clients that it would work. One admission here that there may have been no air in the scuba tank, but it made it look a bit more realistic as a good test. So the next thing is the government started to pay attention to what we were doing. So it's important that governments have to recognise the role of design in the UK. So the UK is famous for its design, engineering, and technology sectors. And I was really lucky to be invited to China with David Cameron, alongside the CEO of JCB, McLaren, the head of the Formula One. It was an incredible lineup of British technology companies, and I was the smallest baby minnow there. But it really showed that the government took it seriously, what we developed, and the impact of what our technology could have on the world. So I think this comes back to, we need to have more support for students in the early stages of their career studying design. It's one of the most expensive degrees to study, just because of the very materials that you need. But we really have to support them, because I was so lucky to be in a position where we had great facilities, inspirational teaching. But actually, there's thousands of students out there who could be delivering the next iPhone. All these technologies could be delivered through students if we inspire them in the right way. And I think that's really important, and government needs to work to change syllabuses to make it more inspirational for early stage people in their design career. So where next? So we went through this amazing journey, and then what we've realized now is our mission is to really change the way people engage in their cities. It's about the human, which is this really powerful engagement from standing on a tile and being part of that process. So much so that in Washington, D.C., outside the White House, where we have our product, people spend their lunch break eating a sandwich, jumping on a tile non-stop. And it's the only thing they can do in their city to be part of it. The next is the physical. So it is your steps that make a difference. Actually, walking is the answer here to powering their future cities. And the digital. So it's understanding that every Pavegen tile produces data, and it gives cities a greater insight into how people are moving. But we also reward people for their footsteps too. So that's a really important part of our vision for Internet of Beings. So we spent a huge amount of time developing the technology. I've got a world-leading tech team based in Cambridge. We built over 500 prototypes. I was leading the first 200, and then we had to bring in other teams to bring to life the rest of them. But essentially, the technology involves a small flywheel embedded under the ground, and as people walk, the flywheel spins. As a subway full of people walk over a tile, it's a constant power source of around 5 watts of energy, so 5 joules of energy per step people make on the technology. So it's one of the most efficient ways to generate the energy, and we do this mostly from production of the UK. And here's a bit of an insight into our kind of how we produce our technologies. So we produce everything in the UK, and that's really important for us. And actually, I don't believe in China manufacturing. UK is just as affordable. So we scaled up production, and then suddenly we're off to Nigeria, Korea, Japan, working with some of the most exciting brands in the world. And the thing that really got them is the way that it can engage people, and it's all about the people taking part in the generation of energy. Then we won some really exciting awards that helped us build forward. And I guess going from there here's some examples of how we actually took Pavegen to different parts of the globe. So it's about making people part of future cities. And I guess one of the things that's happened recently, I guess Siemens, who have over 350,000 staff, have partnered with Pavegen to take our technology to every future new city, which is really interesting from a design-led idea that was just in a workshop through to now in full global deployment stage. So interestingly, one of our first major projects was outside the White House. Now, the White House may not be well known for its views on sustainability and climate change, but we did install it on the day of Trump's inauguration. And what we installed in Washington was 3 major arrays, and we used the energy from people walking on these arrays. We stored it in batteries, and we powered the lighting in the surrounding area. So it's an area where people can come, 10,000 people a day, and their energy during the day will power the lights during the nighttime. And it is the world's first example of a microgrid, but it also connects and sends up data in real time to a website that allows the government to understand more about how people are moving in that urban environment. Another really exciting example was with Oxford Street. So it's one of the busiest retail environments, and I don't know about you, but on a Saturday morning, I can't think of anywhere worse to be than Oxford Street. It's busy, it's crowded, people are bumping into me, and it's actually polluted over the EU limit for more than 300 days a year in terms of the air pollution there. So it's a really tough environment to work in. But we wanted to create an urban oasis in the heart of a city. So we deployed an array of our tiles, but we didn't just power the lights on the street. We actually wanted to make it fun and interactive, somewhere that people can escape to. So as people walk down the street, they can hear birdsong. So it's like they're in this jungle as they walk through it, and they can hear the birdsong, it's playful, and they also get rewards. So as they walk over the tiles, they get rewards on their phone, and then they can go and exchange that for discounts at local stores, but more importantly, they can actually donate their steps to charity. And so we found a way to link social impact through to the act of just walking. So we took it to Heathrow and various other places around the world. And one of the things I wanted to really just kind of finish up with in terms of our projects is we had the opportunity to take the technology to a favela in Rio de Janeiro. Now, this was an incredibly challenging favela environment to work in. And what we wanted to do was say, well, can we use the energy of people playing sport to power the lights in the favela itself? But beyond powering lighting, what other impact can it have? So I'll just show a short video here of the impact it had in that favela environment. So this showed that it wasn't just about an energy technology. The impact of this design and technology we installed in the favela suddenly got people engaged in what was happening. They saw us installing it. The kids suddenly realized what was going on and how they could actually play a part. And the power of sport would not only turn the lights on, but it would keep the lights on. So we actually went on to inspire a whole generation of students to think differently about their future careers. Traditionally, in that favela environment, a lot of the kids want to become soccer stars. But what we did with putting Pavegen in there is we inspired them, and they actually now want to go and become engineers and scientists. So it was an incredible platform to start to really engage people in the community that they live in. So we've got really big, bold ambitions. I believe the process of being a chief executive officer of a technology company as a designer is probably one of the most important backgrounds of education that you could have in this role. Design is not a linear process. You act like a sponge throughout the design process. But as a CEO, you've got to operate in exactly the same way. So having a design-led background, I think, was instrumental to creation of the company, scaling it, but understanding the technical challenges that come within it. But it's also about having bold ideas, and the same idea that I thought of with the first Pavegen. I disappeared into a workshop for 14 hours and came out, and I had a solution. Same thing with scaling our ideas. We've got big, big ambitions. So, the first thing we're working on is to take it to the heart of Oxford Street. Oxford Street is going to be pedestrianised starting next year. We plan to cover the whole of Oxford Street in our tiles to not only power the street, but allow people to donate their footsteps, to pay it forward, to help communities around the world. So, Sadiq Khan's ambition will be a major milestone if we can complete that. So we look to everyone's help, and I have a call to action. If anyone's going to help us to get our tiles to that street, it's really important. So I believe that we can actually create a completely different seismic shift in the way people operate in cities. Cities will no longer be what we experience today, the monotony of queuing for transport, being overcrowded, and these machines around us. That actually, cities can be a really fun place to live in if we put people at their heart. So in my belief, is really, our journey has just started. We've got a long way to go to realize our dreams of Pavegen being the ingredient brand within all future cities. I almost look at it like the Intel inside a PC. Pavegen will be to cities, that ingredient brand that can power it, that can give data and help to reward people. So design gave me a route to business and to see the world in a different way. But I guess more importantly, today, in a world constrained by climate change and resource scarcity, the fear of artificial intelligence taking over, designers have the power to ensure society develops and thrives. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurence. Well, there's a lot of bold ambition in there. I remember you joined us a couple of years ago at our Maker Summit, and you were telling us some of your stories of sort of hacking your way through with that first $5,000, and now it costs $500,000 to do the same sort of work. But it's testament to your bold ambitions. I'm keen to get a little bit more under the skin of that ambition and how you went from this kind of bold tinkering. It wasn't just tinkering or pottering around. It's very dedicated, and largely down to Mr. Hurlow. Thank you for coming along. But how you went from that into this very, very big vision, and thinking a little bit about scale, because scaling is obviously every entrepreneur's ambition. It's also the big block, when we talk about innovation curves and actually getting from idea to implementation. So I'm interested to go a little bit more deeply into how design has helped you to accelerate and innovate and remain kind of focused on this big vision.
Yeah, so I think it's a great question in that when you, I guess, first have an idea in design in the lab, so to speak, you're designing for mass production. You can't just design something as a one-off. And I was learning that age 14. It was like part of the process. So I guess when I had my idea, I was immediately thinking, okay, well, how do you mass produce this? Because that's what I've been taught to do, and that's the process. So I guess one is a kind of a process side, because I believe you can actually build anything as a one-off. But the challenge is, how do you build that thing 10 million times over? So that's a really big challenge. I guess the things that driven driven me is I was really lucky that my great-grandfather was in charge of a lot of the warships and the war, converting them from coal to oil. And so he was like one of the first industrialists who got knighted for his work of doing that. But that was a big challenge. If someone said to you, can you change every single warship to help the Britain's war effort from a coal ship to an oil, that's a big challenge. And he went to do that. And then my grandfather set up a lot of the early production lines in the UK. I think my father lived in 20 different places by the age of 18 because he was setting up production line after production line. So I guess I come from this family of industrialists who've done very much more impactful things than I guess I've achieved. And my ambition is, I guess, with a great team, great support of investors and family, to actually realise the next stage of that industrial revolution. And we are heading to this fourth industrial revolution where you can take an idea, you can scale it in a few weeks, you can crowdfund it, you can use Kickstarter these days, Indiegogo, all these sites to actually create a fully mass-produced product in a very short period of time. That I guess wasn't possible when my great-grandfathers were looking at that space. So I think it's really, we've got the ability, and also I've got, I guess, a big challenge behind me of, got to try and fulfill that requirement.
But how then do you describe a really disruptive environment, which is true. We do live in an era where there are so many emerging technologies, it's difficult to pick a winner. But what you've described there is actually a really focused and disciplined innovation where you know that you have to not do some things along the way. How do you know where to focus and where to not focus, if you like, when there is so much choice?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point for early stage startups in that when you've got an idea and it's a great idea, you can get pulled in 1,000 ways. And the most important thing is that you do have focus and not to get pulled away. Now, for example, for me, I had my first 5 products. They took me 500 hours to make. They were probably worth thousands of pounds each because they were the first batch. And I thought, well, I could sell them, and I had people wanting to buy them, or I could rent them out. And so we thought, okay, well, let's try renting products. And so we ended up doing things like covering the entire Paris Marathon, sending over 37,000 runners, but then we made several £100,000 revenue. Now, that revenue, at that point in time, was so important to fuel the growth of the company. Now, strategically, I think that you've got to think short-term, long-term. And our short-term plan was, let's create revenue from doing like big events using our technology. That essentially what we did, we built the technology in a shoebox, we tested it for a weekend, and if it kind of worked, then we'd scale it and invest in it. So it was a great way for us to hack our way through, because once you put something outside in Washington, D.C., it's £20,000 just to open up that box again. You've got to close down the road. There's a huge amount you've got to put in requests to the government to access it. So really it's about pivoting quickly to get the right revenue growth for your business. But then also in the long term now, we're changing our views. Probably can happen every 2 or 3 weeks based on market conditions, but it's about quick wins and fast fails. So at 9 in the morning, you try something, it doesn't work, you move on. And I think that's why the agility of a small business like ours can actually innovate faster than someone like a Google can, because you can just move quick and jump on something. But I think it's really important to maintain that focus throughout. Although you may have small deviations to get there, as long as that goal's here and, hey, you've done some rental and then you come back in. And now, we're 70% of our revenue is permanent installations in cities, which is exactly where we needed to get to. But I wouldn't have got there without those deviations in the early days to move it forward.
But it wasn't deviation from product, it was actually continuously testing that product, just getting a revenue stream from it, which is an interesting way of continuing to build focus. I'm really interested in that kind of focus discipline as opposed to kind of being too early on, being swayed in lots of different directions. There's lots of talk of agility, but how you actually maintain what your core purpose is it resonates very strongly in the work that you've done with Pavegen. And specifically, I'm interested because, what motivated you alluded to your grandfather there, to choose some kind of big challenges. There's a climate challenge underneath that as well as a, pavement challenge. What motivated you to want to try and solve these big environmental problems?
I think it started off in, I guess I was one of those generations where, geography was all about global warming and it suddenly became a big thing. Sustainability in design was a really big thing. I remember, I guess, age 16 being taken up to Loughborough University for huge sustainability workshops. And that was really ahead of its time. And I guess I had the practices of sustainable design embedded, I guess, within my training to allow me to kind of go out there and say, well, actually, I'm really well equipped to deal with this challenge. And I wasn't developing apps, I wasn't developing platforms, there was no coding. It was actually like pretty hardcore nuts and bolts, embodied energy calculations of how many millijoules is it going to take to get that piece of steel into that product if it's transported by plane from China, and actually going through those tables and so forth. But I think it's just really embedded in me, and obviously I've been really passionate about the environment as well, and it's a way that you can actually make impact. And I believe that being an entrepreneur is the way to have the biggest impact, I guess, on this planet, is by kind of believing in a crazy idea and going for it. And I guess that's kind of what I did in the early days.
And it plays out not just in the environmental challenges, but there's a very human story in what you talk about here, and you kind of play a bit of a critique to the smart cities dialogue by thinking about people at the heart of city-based. You showed an image of just a spaghetti junction with a load of cars, and it looked like the opening to La La Land, which was had a human story, but most people won't have seen that in this room. But it doesn't. You are interested in leading with humans, and you're interested in the play and the joy and the experience. What you want to do with Oxford Street, I think, is really interesting, to try and make it a more human environment through play. I mean, I read it as through play. I'm interested in kind of what inspires your work to kind of see the potential, the human potential in it. So
I think that, for example, competition. So I'm a really competitive person, but the act of competition gets me excited. So if it's, how many steps can you make in the office, everyone's going to be stepping up and down to compete. So I guess as someone who's competitive, I've raced triathlon and Ironman and marathons, and that competitive side of me, I guess, plays out in our products. And that, I hated going to museums when I was younger and looking at a sign. But if there's a button and I could smash that button, I'd be hitting it all day long, and so would all the other kids. And so it's the idea of gamifying life, because hey, life kind of sucks sometimes, but if you can gamify it and make the most mundane of experiences fun, why wouldn't people do it all the time? If it was fun and competitive, why wouldn't people always want to do that? So I think it could have been a combination of looking at the piano keys in Big, where you walk on it and it plays the tune. That was a really fun thing. I definitely want to always walk if I could be a musical instrument, because walking in the grey day in London, late for a meeting, isn't very fun. So I think it's about, if you can make everything playful and exciting, then there's no reason why people wouldn't want to keep doing that.
Absolutely. And maintaining that spirit of joy beyond childhood, I think, is something that comes out in this, and then plays well with those kind of big sporting events. But going beyond that, I was quite taken with the idea of providing sort of role models for kids beyond the footballing archetype or something like that, but actually that, look, this material, you could also be a scientist. So it's sort of broadening out that ambition or potential through playing with the materials. I'm going to come to the audience now, so please raise your hand. I've got one last question for you before I do. You talked about you being, or the UK being famous for design, engineering and tech. And certainly, you showed quite a lot of pictures of designers, Great Britain, and actually how we can export, if you like, our design capabilities. But I'm interested a little bit about what can, educators, you talked about support for students, but specifically what can educators or governments or investors do to enable conditions for designer businesses like yours to grow?
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge question, but I mean, I'd say you could start off grassroots level. I was really uninspired in design until suddenly I got to do cool stuff, and it was, it's along the same lines of, is it competitive, is it fun, is it if it's engaging, then I wanted to do it. So I think that some of the syllabuses are so backward because the people setting the syllabuses aren't sitting here today. Maybe you are. If you are, let's speak. But I think it's a real challenge, and there is a lag in getting them. So I'd say that it's about making fun things. I'd say that one of the challenges we have is we don't get many female engineers applied to roles. And I could say, okay, well, that's not my problem. But actually, if you go back into it, a lot of girls traditionally in early stages of education, if they get given a bird box, like a dumb project, as I saw it, it's very easy for girls to lose interest in that. Whereas if we actually tailored specific projects that were maybe more interesting to girls at a certain age, maybe I would have 50-50 split of engineers applying to roles at my company. But I think that's definitely, at Loughborough, there may have been 5 or 6 girls versus 100 males on it. And I think that's a big problem because I'm losing losing 50% of the catchment pot of great minds. So I think we need to do more to inspire them. And I'm no expert to exactly say what needs to be done, but I'm sure that if we got that early stage thing, it could really solve a lot of big problems. And then going beyond that into like latter stages of design, people have got great ideas. Designers are full of great ideas, but actually the biggest things, the incoming we get is from designers asking us how do they take their ideas and make it a reality. And there's no like one-stop shop with, hey, go to this email, go to this website and do this. Actually, there's a few things that you've got to do, but I think the government's got to make it better. So you've got to like believe in your idea, you've got to be really, really good market fit, you've got to execute brilliantly, you've got to find investors who really believe in you. And I was really lucky to find investors who believed in essentially a bench rig that was just like a mechanical footstep that was just hammering away on a tile. And I think some of them are here tonight, Brian Dobson and Julian Jane Kirkness maybe, who really supported it when it was like a crazy idea. But I think the government's done good things with investment schemes that allow, it's really beneficial with the EIS investment schemes to invest, but I think they should do more. I think we've got a great climate for early stage investments in the UK, but it could be a lot better, because if you think about the jobs that are provided from those, I think it's a great funnel to really invest into. So I think more policies that are friendly on that. Manufacturing is expensive in the UK. When you look at some of the especially around London and the south, it's a real challenge. I have to manufacture up north. You can get land prices similar to the prices you'd experience in China. But I think we need to do more in the south of the UK to promote manufacturing growth. A lot of the manufacturers I used in the south no longer exist anymore. So I think they need to do more to support UK-led manufacturing as a base. And I think they could do that through tax breaks that could be, help them. I want my manufacturer to be making lots of money. But when my manufacturer isn't making lots of money, I'm having pretty hard phone calls with my manufacturers, right? So it's that cash flow situation. The R&D tax credits are really great. They really help us. But I think, there could be more beneficial schemes to help companies with innovation. Because making stuff is hard. Like, hardware is hard for a reason. And some of the best hardware companies in the UK still really struggle as opposed to digital. So I think there should be more support, because although design is digital, there is still a huge physical embodiment to things people design. Everyone needs stuff and physical things.
No, especially, well, some of your prototyping, even with the fake oxygen tank, looked quite physical in what you were doing there. It's interesting what you say there about the gender split, actually. I remember my design and technology teacher saying to me, I just think maybe you should just not do this GCSE because you're a bit rubbish at the old woodwork. And so I didn't do design and technology, and I got siphoned into fashion, which I was also rubbish at doing textile and fashion design, although did a degree in it. But that is an interest. I think there are maybe some gender perceptions that are pretty hardwired, and how we really plug some of those gaps is an important thing, because gamification is interesting to everyone. Games, we all play games. So I think there's some really interesting learnings there for education. So I'm going to go to the audience. So if you want to put your hands up, I have some roving mics. And it's International Women's Day tomorrow, ladies, and I've got no ladies' hands up. Thank you very much. I'll start with this lady, and then I'll come to the gentleman.
Hi there, thank you so much.
Oh, this lady. Microphone, sorry.
I get a mic, thanks. Hi, thank you so much for your talk. It was really inspiring and interesting. I work in an organisation focusing on governance advisory support to African governments, and I'm really curious about your experience in implementing Pavegen in a kind of developing context. I don't know if you've done it anywhere in Africa. I'm curious particularly in terms of, number one, what is the cost, and given that the community and the kind of city experience is very different, did that have any implications for how you designed or redesigned or set it up? And what about the sustainability? So when you go, are the guys in Brazil in the favela going to be able to maintain the Pavegen sort of installation? And I'm particularly interested in whether, when you talk about inspiring those in the local community, especially in a developing context, are you interested, or have you done anything in kind of enabling that? So, for example, I'm currently talking to a guy in Kenya who set up a design school, and we're looking at, using human-centered design in our government work. That was a very long question, I'm sorry.
So the developing context, how do you choose to, or how do you adapt your work to the developing world, and do you do any capacity building to enable it once you go on?
So I'll answer the second one first. Obviously, we're a small company with massive challenges, and 16 hours a day is like the limit you can pretty much work for. But I guess we try and really focus our efforts. So, like, one thing we've done is Simon Langton School, where I studied and where Brian Hurlow's from, is we've run a program with them for around 5 years, where it's the Queen's Engineering Award Scheme, and they send us 7 or 8 of their brightest students, and these guys are like guys and girls have got like A-levels in physics and maths and like chemistry. It's like they're all far brighter than myself, and we give them our technology and we say, can you build us new products? So we've had, they've gone away and built shoes that generate energy, stairs that generate energy, roads, and these guys usually win the top award. So it's amazing to see that, like, we give them, we'll give them some funding, we'll give them the kit, we'll give them the access to engineers, and it's really their imagination that limits it. But the teams, and we get multidisciplinary teams coming in, are so amazing that every year, wow, so this year they were so great, the team that sent through, we actually like invested a chunk of cash for them to further develop the idea because we thought it was brilliant. And so we're really keen on doing that, but it has to be focused. And I'd love to find a way that you could take that same amount of effort and take it to 10,000 students. And it's like a key challenge that I guess we'll keep addressing as we move forward. The next one about developing economies is the first project we did in Lagos was actually in a college, and it was a Dr. Bute college, and we installed our tiles on a soccer pitch, similar to Brazil. And again, the reaction was like amazing. They were all teachers who were training. And so all the teachers would come there and train, thousands of them, and then take those to the rural areas. So what I found is we'd love to get local teams, but without scaling properly in that region, it's really, really difficult. The company that did our work, they did a construction, but they also like sold photocopiers, and apparently that's like normal in Nigeria compared to like here. They do everything, and they'd like Snapchat us their technical reports, and it was a really different way of working. I think that for us to scale in that region, you need to really, really commit. So, for example, we partnered with Akon, and so Akon is a famous hip-hop artist, but he recently became a really well-respected renewable energy entrepreneur. He took solar to around 6 countries in Africa. He got some funding from China and give solar out. Now, he only focused in several regions. He didn't go, right, I'm going to do the whole of Africa. You've got to be incredibly focused. And I also think you need to adopt different business models. So I don't think I'd necessarily sell the products in Africa. I think I'd probably find a way to give them to local communities who then pay us on an annualized basis for that energy. And I think that we need to be more developed to really make the most of that, because if you've got a maintenance challenge from the crazy amount of sand and maybe heat that we don't quite experience in a Western society, you need to be ready for that. But I think that's definitely something we're looking at in the future to move into. And it has to be done in a sustainable way, and it has to be done with like maximum commitment. You can't just do a project and forget about it. You've really got to invest in that market. You've got to have people on the ground, and you've got to adopt a different business model that can work for it as well.
Excellent. So, gentleman beside you, and then a lady behind you, and then I'll come to the middle. So, yeah.
Hi, Laurence. We probably met in 2013 in Beijing, the business summit. So congratulations for all the achievements. My question is, my practice does garden cities master planning, and we always heard about these smart cities, what kind of technologies, but it's always kind of very vague. So today, I particularly come here today to ask you about some grand ideas about smart cities, how you could integrate these technologies into large-scale master planning, urban planning. Thank you.
Yeah. So the problem with smart cities is that most cities in the world are hundreds of years old. There's probably only going to be 10 cities over the next 20 years that are built from scratch. So NEOM in Saudi Arabia, you've got most in the Middle East that have just been built from scratch. Now that gives an incredible opportunity for people with new ideas to deploy things en masse. I've tried to, a couple of years ago, tried to install it on Oxford Street. The reason I couldn't put it on Oxford Street is because the tube sticks out into the road, right? There's so much clunky, old, retro equipment in our cities that to have a true utopian smart city is really, really difficult. Google, Sidewalk Labs, are developing a huge area in Toronto. And to Google have really committed to understanding that makeup in a future city. And because they're doing these hundreds of acres from the start, they can really make it beneficial. I think that things like having all your rubbish underground and all your deliveries underground and last mile delivery with autonomous vehicles, and even if it's just a small, almost like remote control car that can just deliver things around, can really help to make those cities better. But I think you need this big master plan, and it needs to be led with people. And so like we offer one component of that is also, it's got your kind of energy component, it's got your kind of people-centered component, but there's so much that goes into these future cities that it's almost like it's really unknown what a smart city is, and people are trying stuff out to see what sticks. So I wish I had the full answer, but the good news is like right now, cities, when they have the idea, they're putting in our technology, but we can plug into anything. So in the future, we may have like hydrogen fuel cells on every street corner. There'll probably be some kind of robotic flying drones coming around and heliports on top of every single major building, but you get everything you buy would be rapid prototype then and there. And there's all these other like theories around it, but actually, I think we're still realistically like 10 years away from like a perfect smart city. And NEOM, I think, is going to be built in 2025, and that Siemens are involved in, and we're working on that. And that could be like the first kind of green shoots of a true smart city. And I think everyone needs to kind of collaborate, master planners, technologists, government, most importantly, to make and bring these things to reality.
So if you want to pass the microphone back to the lady behind you.
Hi, thank you very much for your talk. Very interested in the human engagement of your product as well as the sustainability, but I'd like to ask you about the digital aspect and what data do you collect through the tiles? How do you use that data, and how do you reconcile that with privacy and the quid pro quo, I guess, that consumers are prepared to make with brands?
Yeah, so the GDPR laws are going to do great things for society and make sure we are protected. And the good thing is, with the data we utilize, is nothing to do with the GDPR. We don't infringe it, any of those things. The key thing is you've got to opt in. So what happens is, when you walk on Pavegen tiles, we get like generic data. So I don't know who you are. I just know how many people, when the surges were, how busy it was at certain times. That aside, we've recently developed a platform that connects your mobile device to the floor. So when you walk over it, it says, hey, you've done 52 footsteps. What would you like to do with your footsteps? Would you like to, A, maybe go to the coffee shop there and get some money off your purchase, or B, would you like to donate your steps to charity? So we're working with some of the major brands at the moment that allow people to decide where their spend goes. So it really brings it back to people actually making change in their city. So we did a project in Las Vegas where we powered schools for 40,000 students in Nepal, and a pure donation. I call it like stealing from the rich and giving to the poor, the digital version of Robin Hood, if you like, from just the people walking. But what happens is, in order to make your donation or to get money off your coffee or your purchase, you have to opt in. So you say yes. It's a fair exchange of value. If you want to make a change, we can have your information, and it will only be used by us, so it's like a safe way to do it. But that way allows us to really allow millennials, who I think all of them are driven by the idea of you've got to create positive social impact. That actually, the very act of going for a coffee, you could actually help someone in South Sudan in a school there. And we're working on these platforms that can connect wealthy areas in cities, but actually make a real difference in another part of the world in a safe, permission-based way. Thanks.
Robin, then Twitter. It's coming to you. And then if there's were there any on this side of the audience that I'll come to next? Otherwise, I'll come back to this
Hi.
side.
I'm really interested in the intellectual property aspect of what you're doing. And you talked about wanting to make the biggest possible impact. Might that be to do a Tim Berners-Lee and give it to the world? I mean, how does it stand on the whole protection of what you created, and what happens when everyone else starts to do something similar?
So intellectual property is the most important part of scaling a product technology business. So that is our DNA. That is the blueprint for like survival, if you like. So for us, it's really important to protect those ideas. In the early days, everyone wants a piece of it, and we had to make sure we protected it. We even got to a point where I think in the early days of Pavegen, we had £190,000 in the bank account. and I had to spend £185,000 on international patent filings. And I had, that was the day. If I didn't do it on that day, I'd lose it all. So I had 18 months till my first filing. And you know what? I decided to do it, right? And we just pulled up out of the red, and it was all good. But if I hadn't have done that, we'd have no backbone of a company. Essentially, you know, the most important thing is if I'm importing a product to Korea, if I've got a patent granted in Korea, it then means that they can seize anyone else from China, for example, bringing in a product. So it gives me protection at border level. You know, today we've got granted patents in America, China, Australia, Europe, and we've got several patent families that have gone through prosecution, and it's a really important part of what we do. I mean, gone are the days of me filing my first patent at 3 a.m. the day before I first revealed the product, but we've got a great team involved in it, and it's so important to do. I don't think at this stage we'd be able to like give it away. I think we've got to get to a critical mass. And hey, if I got like Tesla did, and obviously they're giving it away because they need to know about the charging for vehicles. But I think at this stage we need to own and really manage that until we can work with an organisation big enough to take it to the world together with that ownership of that core IP.
Thanks. It was really interesting to hear your own experience of becoming a designer and all the personal experiences that led to that. How have you, as you move into your business and developed a company and your colleagues and staff, how have you created a culture of design? And what do you think that looks like in your company that's different to another kind of organisation? What are those kind of key ingredients?
So I think, you know, for us, we have like a team, a design team, right? They don't sit in a back room, like they sit around like me in the hub. I'm right in the middle of all of them, and it's really important that everything we do goes through designers. Be it a corporate report, we may spend weeks looking at our email signature to see how it looks. Every bit of content that comes out of our company has had a designer or several designers look at it, and we've got graphic, product, industrial. We've got, for 5 years in a row, we've been taking placement students from Loughborough University. I love going to Loughborough because they think like I do, so I understand them really, really well. And they do everything within our organisation, so going into the sales function, marketing, and even in internal requirements as well. So I think for us, we are a design-enabled organisation. We probably take it for granted a little bit in that I'm a designer and everyone's saying, why have you got so many designers working for you? But it really is the DNA of what we do. The brand is important to us, and we really look after that brand very carefully, however it's communicated. And I think when you've got an engineering team trying to make a great engineered product, we're always jumping in and being like, well, how can we really like build this in to make it really, truly beautiful with our brand? So like we recently rebranded, and we made the V of Pavegen have a line under it, the accent. And the V is an arrow pointing to the device that generates energy. And we've now put that onto all of our products, so you can see it visually, and it's that identity is really so important for us. So I think we've kind of got design at our core, but I think as we scale, it's so important to work hard to scale it in every part of the organisation moving forward.
Somehow I just can't believe that you spent weeks looking at an email signature, but I'll let that one lie. Gentleman over there, and then did we have anyone? And gentleman in the front here. So whoever gets the mic first, you're on. I think it's this gentleman.
Thank you, Laurence. I wanted to ask whether you had a co-founder that you brought on board, and if not, how did you find it going by yourself?
So the majority of like technology or just startups in the UK, they usually have a co-founder. Usually you've got a technical co-founder and a non-technical. In my case, it was just me. I was lucky I had great investors early on that supported me. My dad initially was my chairman and my CFO. Luckily not anymore, but he did a great job. I think he might be here, did a great job. It's definitely a challenge because things get slowed down. If I'm abroad on business and then there's stuff happening, it has to wait. So I definitely always say, you know, if I was to do it again, on day one, find that co-founder who can, you know, get in there with you, work really, really hard, and be prepared to sweat as much you've got to sweat to make it a reality. So I guess it's nice that I call all the shots, I guess. I don't have to answer to anyone. But I would, for my next company, getting a co-founder would definitely be beneficial. So I'd advise you to do that. I think Entrepreneur First has a really great platform for putting together co-founders to build great platforms. So it's been, I guess there's only one or two people sitting, or it's usually just me, you know, in the office at 1 in the morning, which would be nice if there's someone else there. But I think, you know, I've got used to that journey, and it's I guess it's the kind of DNA which we operate now. It's just me at the moment.
And you have
I appreciate the emphasis on the future of design skills for young children and future students, but there's a generation of millennials now that sort of missed the boat on, myself included, on developing those technical design skills. What would your recommendation be for our generation wanting to get into this who don't have those hard skills? And then my other question is, have you thought about a partnership with Fitbit about the step counting?
Yeah, so I guess on the first question is, in terms of, I guess, the new theme now, the revolution that's going on at the moment is it's all about people doing development, UI, UX development, people coding. There's so much stuff online for that, but in terms of like core industrial design and like product design, I look at that as almost like a polar opposite. We're still solving problems, but the skills of industrial/product designer, I think polar opposite to a developer, although you maybe would embody solutions in different ways. I'd say that it's interesting because, for example, how we learn, we talked about doing the wood filings and in a machine shop. The most boring thing in the world is sitting there for 4 hours on a lathe. People would pass out because they were just standing up for so long during training. And hours and hours and hours on this lathe, looking at a bit of metal. But the reason that was so important is when I design a product, I know exactly how the machine works. And I go, well, I won't do that. If I put that feature in, it will take an extra 10 minutes to make and it will impact the cost. So there's some really like painful, slow learnings with industrial design that aren't very fun. Like engineering drawing, when you do these by hand, they even monitor the font at which you write your annotations on have to be done in an exact way. And if it's not, you like lose your point. So I'd say that definitely degree is the best way forward. There's a lot of online things around sketching, because industrial design doesn't have to be everything. It can be sketching or maybe the electronics and mechanical aspects. So I think pick your area, and there's certain things to really focus on. But I think industrial design as a whole, I say it'd be really hard to do like a short course in it per se, or go join a company and see which aspects really interest you as well. And we run internships and so forth too, so there's always those opportunities.
Yeah. So they can be the very costly intern like you were for Eon. Yeah. Well, I think, sadly, we have run out of time. This has been a fascinating conversation, but we'll have to wrap up this session. Thank you for an excellent set of questions. And I'd also like to thank Innovate UK again for their partnership and support. We are having drinks downstairs, so we will be able to continue the discussion at the drinks reception in the Benjamin Franklin room downstairs on the ground floor. But I've really enjoyed your talk, Laurence, and I will go away with this concept of moving from the Internet of Things to the Internet of Being. So please join me in thanking our terrific speaker, Laurence Kemball-Cook.